Thank you for joining the 49ers Camelot Show. I'm excited to have you, excited to have my guest, Steph Sanchez. Steph is the host of 49 Carats podcast, and she's also the co-host of Bully Ball on the Gold Standard Network. I haven't caught your 49 Carats podcast yet, although I'm going to have to check that out now. But Bully Ball, I've listened to you and Jason on that plenty of times, and y'all are great. Thanks for joining me. How much fun do you have doing the content creation that you're doing? Because you're doing a lot.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. I mean, it helps when you like the 49ers, right? When you're a fan of them. So it's definitely opened my eyes a little bit. I think you get to see the team in almost like a different perspective when you have to cover them in this fashion. So it's definitely different, but it's fun. It just adds to the excitement of everything.
Yeah, I talked to John Chapman. He was my very first guest because I just started this a couple of months ago, and he was my very first guest. And I'd say about a year ago, he was trying to talk me into doing this along with a few others, and I just kept putting it off. And so he said, "Look, I'll be your first guest if you do this." And so, he's full time doing this now, and I just write on a part time basis for 49ers Web Zone, and it's kind of changed, like you said, it's changed how I see the team, how not really how I root, because I still want them to win more than just about anything, but it kind of adds to it changes the game for me. Instead of just sitting there watching, I'm taking notes, I'm writing things so that I can write about it the next day. And I told him, I was like, I'm so happy for all of you who want to do this full time and you're making it happen. I'm not sure I want to do it full time because the 49ers to me, it's an escape from my real life. And so if this becomes a job, then what am I going to escape to? So is that kind of where you're at? Or you're like, no, I want to do this full time?
That totally makes sense. I know I've other people who have been doing this content creation stuff a little longer than me tell me like they get into those slumps where it's like, man, like I don't even enjoy talking about the Niners right now, or I think we all kind of get into those moods a bit. I don't do it full time actually. I have another job that I consider my full-time job, pays the bills. This is still more for fun, although I feel like I have two full-time jobs sometimes, because when I'm not doing, my 9 to 5, I'm working on this almost entirely all the other times. So yeah, it is a lot of work. I think that's what a lot of people don't realize is like if you want to be taken seriously and you want to have like a big amount of content to put out
Mhm.
there, it is so much work.
Yeah.
And I think that's what sometimes gets a little exhausting, but it has some rewards as well. And so like I said, I think being a fan of the team is really important, because if I didn't care about the 49ers, if I wasn't passionate about the 49ers, I
Yeah.
think I'd feel a whole lot different.
Yeah, I bet. Well, you just recently got to go to your very first NFL combine. How was that experience?
It was awesome. That was my first time getting credentialed for an NFL event, and then the Senior Bowl, which was like the week before or the month before that, um, was my first time getting credentialed to any like football
Okay.
event or just any event. So that was cool. And then being able to go to the combine was just that on steroids. And yeah, it was a great experience. First, like getting to interview players, something that I personally I'll be transparent about. That's something I hadn't really done much before, and something that I want to get better at. So being at the combine kind of allowed me, because I was there like 4 or 5 days, it allowed me the time to every day just get a little more comfortable, get a little bit better with that. So it was an awesome experience, both from like just being able to learn things and being able to meet new people, and also being able to see these guys who, are on their way to uh, living out their dreams, right, of making it to the NFL. That aspect of
Yeah.
it is really cool as well.
So who was your favorite interview?
I would say I think his name's Jake Andrews. He is from Troy, and
Okay.
definitely was gave me the best impression. Yeah, Jake Andrews. Out of all of the interviews that I did, just because he got so in depth with his answers, like he really thought
Hmm.
about what he was telling me, and it wasn't just to answer, right? But he was truly engaged in the conversation, and gave me some good in depth responses. So I really appreciated that. And he just seems like a guy who loves football, loved the process of being out there at the combine, and yeah, it was really cool to interview him. Great personality.
Now, are these one-on-ones, or is it like when John Lynch did his press conference and there's multiple media in the room? Is it more like that, or were you able to get some one-on-ones?
Yeah, it is like that. It's somewhat like a scrum, right? So there are podiums. There's several podiums, and any media member can just go up to these podiums to ask a player a question. You can imagine the players who are like first rounders have 30 or more people surrounding their podium, so that can get pretty competitive if you want to try to ask a question. And then for the, I guess, I don't know, lesser known prospects who are there, or
Mhm.
who they figure will have less people asking them questions, they have tables off to the side, still podium style, but it's just smaller, like eye level type of setup, where those are great opportunities to really get those one on ones, because at any time you go up to these players, they probably have like one or two other people in front of them at wanting to ask them questions. So that's a good chance to rattle off, three questions at a time. And you don't really have to like compete with other media
Yeah.
members. But yeah, that's pretty much how it's set up.
And who knows, maybe you got a chance to interview the next Mr. Irrelevant who could become Mr. Relevant again.
You never
So
know.
all of the beat writers talk about every year I hear them talk about the places that they ate and things like that. What was your favorite spot?
I did really want to eat at St. Elmo's. I didn't get a chance because that's the one everyone talks about. I didn't get a chance. I did go to another steakhouse to have a nice steak dinner one night. I told myself, if I'm gonna be out there, I gotta do that. They have a ton of steakhouses out there. I don't know if what their deal is, but they love steaks, I guess. And I'm forgetting the name. I think it's Prime 47 or something like that.
Okay.
Um, so that was pretty good. But honestly, the best food I had, I was like severely hungover one of the days, and and I had a calzone that I just like door dashed to my hotel, and that was an amazing calzone. It
Hmm.
was pretty good. I don't remember the name of the place, but I will remember that calzone.
Yeah, and I have heard that there's a little bit of drinking going on that week as well. So you confirmed that. Well, let's get into the team, especially because this week was has so far has been a pretty important week. On Monday, John Lynch spoke at
Hmm.
the annual NFL meetings, and yesterday, Tuesday, Kyle Shanahan spoke. So when Lynch spoke on Monday, he was talking about the starting quarterback situation for the 49ers. And he said, with the way he's played, Brock's probably the leader in the clubhouse for that if he's healthy. So Kyle Shanahan kind of echoed the same thing. So my question for you is, if you're the decision maker, is Brock Purdy QB1? Has he shown enough to make you believe in him?
Yeah, I think he's shown enough. I don't think it's surprising at all that, both Lynch and Kyle would be on the same page about that he's the leader of the clubhouse, right? And for the reasons they mentioned, it's not just him going 8-1, and you could even say he went undefeated if you don't count the loss to the Eagles,
Mhm.
right? 'Cause I personally don't think that should count against him. But it's the way in which he did it, right?
Yeah.
And the one thing I would say though, I think I would give Trey Lance an opportunity to show what he has while they have the opportunity to
Mhm.
have a really good look at him. This is a great time to do that because now Brock Purdy isn't going to be, really breathing down his neck as much since he's going to be rehabbing. Um, and it just, I get the sense that they're just not interested in giving Trey Lance that opportunity. And I think for me, if I was the decision maker, which I'm not, but let's just say, right, I think I would be wanting to see what Trey Lance has, and I would be open to if Trey Lance looks good, he's competing with Brock Purdy. Not if Trey Lance looks good, he's competing with Sam Darnold,
Right.
right? So that's what it seems like right now. He's going to be competing with Sam Darnold. He's going to be sharing first team reps with Sam Darnold, There's just something that I don't feel right about that. I want him to get a fair shot, and it feels like he's gonna have to kind of make some magic happen in limited opportunities.
Yeah, it is really weird the way it's almost like they have fallen out of love with him, and I go back to some of the things that John Lynch said at the combine where he basically said Brock's the guy if healthy, and then he said that again this week. But then when he said something to the effect of, he took his opportunity and ran with it, and we just have to find a way to get Trey some opportunities. And I thought, well, man, Brock's hurt. This is the opportunity to get Trey those reps,
Exactly.
and so then here comes Sam Darnold. I initially thought Sam Darnold's just going to be the third string quarterback,
Hmm.
but now here's Kyle Shanahan. You mentioned this yesterday, saying that Trey and Darnold are going to both get reps, starter reps, and so then here's the thing that I saw that Ian Rappaport yesterday said Sam Darnold will more likely than not be the 49ers starting quarterback in week 1. Do you buy that, or do you think, come on, there's no way that Sam Darnold's going to beat out Trey Lance?
I think it's twofold. Like I think that as of right now, that may be the sentiment for this team. I don't know because he said that 2 days in a row. The day before after John Lynch spoke, Rap talked about John Lynch's comments and immediately after said, and this is why they brought in Sam Darnold, because if Brock Purdy isn't able to if he's not ready by week 1, you have a guy who's been there before, who has the experience. Did not mention Trey Lance once. So I
Mm,
don't know if he's saying that because of he's hearing that from the 49ers, or maybe he's friends with the agent. I hope it's the latter, but yeah, I feel like it's possible that's the sentiment right now, and it's also possible this is a fluid situation, right? And whatever happens, I mean, it's March. Whatever happens in training camp and OTAs and beyond, that can change, that can shift what the team thinks, right, to some extent. It doesn't really feel that way right now. It doesn't seem like they have an open mind, right, to Trey Lance,
yeah.
but it's a fluid situation. I think it's something like Trey Lance, making some headway and impressing the team is still on the table.
Yeah.
So we'll just have to wait and see. But I think to not panic about what's being said right now, I think is important. Because we don't know. They don't know what's going to happen. So it's a fluid situation.
If Trey Lance does get the starting job, let's say that, well, let's talk about Brock Purdy first, because that's going to lead into the Trey Lance discussion. There, John Lynch talked like he thought Brock Purdy would be back week 1. Kyle
Mhm.
Shanahan didn't sound as optimistic yesterday, But I heard Jake Delhomme speak a couple of weeks ago on KNBR. He had the actual Tommy John surgery late in his career. And he said that he was throwing a Nerf football within a couple of months, and that within 6 months he was cleared to play. And he actually said, I think that I could have been cleared sooner, but it wasn't that time of the year. Like we weren't up against, like we're about to have a game or something like that. And so that seems crazy to think, and it goes against everything we've heard. But he said that he thought that Brock Purdy should be ready in week 1. You're obviously not a doctor, but where do you fall on this? Do you believe what Jake Delhomme is saying? I can't imagine that he'd be lying, but to me, I don't think that he's going to be ready week 1.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think he's lying either, but we got to be careful using one player's timeline to make that the timeline, or have that be the standard against someone else's timeline, because every player is different. And I had ESPN analyst Stefania Bell on my channel, and I asked her pretty much about the difference between Tommy John and the repair that Purdy had, and also the difference between, how baseball players versus football players would recover from this. I think what we should hold true to this point is we won't know too much until after the 3 months. Like once he starts throwing after those 3 months, then we'll have a better idea what beyond that the timeline is going to be. And that's pretty much what Kyle Shanahan said. That's pretty much what John Lynch, said, even though John Lynch clearly a little more optimistic on the timeline. I thought it was problematic, in my opinion, for him to say, we hope that he'll be ready by training camp, because that puts pressure on the player.
Yeah.
But yeah, basically, like in my conversation with Stefania, it's like every player is different. And the timeline can't really be set right now. Like we don't know if he's going to be ready in 6 months. And return to play, meaning fully cleared, is not necessarily return to performance.
That's a great point.
So, yeah, and that what she said stuck out to me the most, because like I was in my head thinking, okay, well, if he gets cleared before week 1, he's going to be the week 1 starter, when in reality, like, you got to look at, does he look the same as he did before?
Yeah.
That may take a little bit longer. So, I think, one, we shouldn't feel too bad if he's not ready by week 1, right? And that's what, John Lynch saying something like, we hope he's ready by training camp. If Brock isn't ready by training camp, is Brock going to feel bad? Like, oh, like, shoot, like I failed, or like, this isn't going well, kind of thing. So I don't know. I think it's smarter to just have a more, just looking at the 3 months, because that's like a small time frame that we can look to, and then from there see what the timeline looks after that.
Yeah, I love that line. That's going to stick out to me as well, because I think that's a great point, that even if he's ready physically for week 1, he may not be ready performance wise. So let's say that he's not. Had Matt Barrows on a few weeks ago, and Matt is convinced that it's going to be 3 or 4 weeks. That's kind of where I fall as well, just because, I mean, the 49ers and injury, especially when it comes to quarterback, they don't have the greatest luck. And so to me, even if doctors were saying he'll be ready week 1, I still don't know if I'd believe it, because it's the 49ers. But if, let's say that he does miss 3 to 4 weeks, I think that this is a great opportunity for Trey Lance. If Trey plays well in that time, when Brock Purdy is healthy, if Trey's playing well and the team is winning, what do you think happens? Does Kyle Shanahan stick with the hot hand like he's done, or does he go back to Brock Purdy?
Well, I mean, Kyle Shanahan did say that Trey Lance has a chance to get back the starting position, right? And if he's honest about that, then, I think if Trey Lance has a successful going, and he does actually look good in training camp, and they let him start week 1 and a little after that, and he's winning games, and I think they got to take a serious look at the situation once again, and kind of, make a decision based on that. But I think there's a lot more that may go into the decision ultimately, but definitely they'll have to consider it, or at least I hope they would, right?
Yeah. So last week, I wrote an article for 49ers Web Zone
Mm.
on the 10 biggest mistakes in 49ers history. And as I was leading into those 10, there were some that I said I'm not going to include these. And one of those was trading or using 3 first round draft picks on Trey Lance,
Mm.
essentially. And the reason that I didn't include that is because we don't yet know
Yeah.
if people call him a bust, but there's just no way to know that. Do you do you align with that it's just way too early to say that was a mistake, or are you in the camp that okay, maybe he becomes the 49ers starting quarterback, but still using 3 first round draft picks on a single guy was a mistake? Where are you at on that?
I mean, I think it looks bad right now, right? And not just because we don't know what Trey Lance is yet, and that's not his fault. He's gotten hurt. The first year they chose to start Jimmy Garoppolo before him. A lot of different factors went into Trey Lance not playing as much and us not knowing who or what he is yet, right? So I don't hold that against him, but it right now it looks bad just because we don't have any idea what he is. But I think it is too early to make that definitive, statement that yeah, that was a bust pick, or like
Mm-hmm.
they shouldn't have done that. What I would, I guess, question the most is, are the 49ers ever going to give him that shot? Because if they
Mm-hmm.
don't, it's a bad pick because the 49ers made that decision, not because of Trey Lance.
Right.
I think we're at this weird point where we're questioning why they made that pick.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that's not Trey Lance's fault because he was a raw, athlete who didn't have a lot of experience. And the 49ers knew this before they made that pick, before they traded up to 3. And that's not his fault.
Right.
He goes into this situation and he's getting treated like James Wiseman kind of was with the Warriors. I see a lot of people making that parallel, and I can totally see it. And you got to wonder, is this going to lead to Trey Lance eventually getting traded, right? Like the Warriors did Wiseman. And so I think if that happens, I think it's a bad pick on the Niners, right? Like I
Yeah.
think it reflects badly on them more so than Trey Lance. I see people, fans of other teams, on Twitter say all the time, like, I don't understand why the 49ers just don't want to give Trey Lance a chance. Like, what are they doing? Like, and looking at it from the outside, it's like, yeah, like, what are they doing? Why did they invest these picks on him if they are not invested in him? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think it's too early to say. But if it ever happens that the 49ers decide to go a different direction for good, it's going to look badly on them, not on Trey Lance.
Yeah, that's a great point. And because he really hasn't had his chance yet. I mean,
Yeah.
think about he came in 2021. He came in, played the second half for Jimmy Garoppolo against the Seahawks. He had that injured finger or thumb. I don't even remember what it was. I think it was a broken finger or something that took place in preseason. Then he starts against the Cardinals. The game plan was terrible, and maybe it was terrible because he was injured and couldn't throw. His teammates were terrible in that game. I remember so many holding calls and missed tackles on defense. It was just a mess. So then he injures his knee in that one. So then when he plays later in the season against Houston, he's still dealing with that finger. So then he comes to 2022, has to play in a downpour in Chicago, and then gets hurt in the next game. So it's like not only have we not seen him, but we haven't seen him really have a legit chance that's abnormal. If you look at Jimmy Garoppolo's numbers from the Colts game in 2021, when he played in a downpour, a monsoon, it was just as bad, if not worse, than Trey Lance. In fact, he turned the ball over more than Trey Lance did. And so, nobody talks about that. They just talk about how bad Trey Lance was on that day. They don't talk about how Deebo Samuel on that opening drive fumbled
Yeah,
right
that
down
was
there
huge.
in the red zone,
That
because
was
they
huge.
would have scored at least a field goal. So if Trey is the starter at the beginning of the season, once Brock Purdy is healthy, or if they're just really liking Sam Darnold and he's the backup, how long do you think Trey Lance's leash is? Are they going to be patient with him, or as soon as he has a bad game, do you think they're going to pull him out?
I don't know. It's hard to tell. Right now, it doesn't even feel like he has a leash. It doesn't feel like he's even has a collar on. Like he's just like this lost puppy on this team. Um, but I would say it feels like his leash is not very long, right? Especially if the things we're hearing about Sam Darnold, his name keeps getting brought up. Like if they're really considering Sam Darnold being an option and they want Lance to compete with Darnold, it doesn't feel like his leash is very long. Because there's no reason it should be short to begin with, right? By
Yeah.
no fault of his own is he in this situation where he has to all of a sudden compete, right? Um, and so I think one thing that stood out was like I forgot if it was John Lynch or Kyle Shanahan. I think it was Kyle that said like nothing has changed since last season with Trey. Like we still feel the same about him. Trey Lance was a starter in week 1.
Mm-hmm.
Unquestioned starter. Started over Jimmy Garoppolo. What and now suddenly he's competing with Sam Darnold. How
Yeah.
is that the same? Is Sam Darnold better than Jimmy Garoppolo? I don't think I wonder if he's even better than Trey Lance, right? But
Yeah.
I think the thing with Trey Lance is that he's raw. He doesn't have the experience. He needs the reps. So on and so forth. The same things we keep hearing over and over. But yeah, it's such a weird situation, but it looks like by all indications that he has a short leash.
Yeah, and it is strange when they say nothing's changed, because the way that they talk about him has changed. And
Yeah.
so it makes us think that their viewpoint of him has changed,
Yeah.
but I guess we'll see. Let's talk real quick about something that John Lynch said on Monday about Colton McKivitz. He kind of talked like he's the leader in the clubhouse,
Mhm.
like he talked about the quarterbacks, that he's the
Yeah.
leading candidate to become the starting right tackle. But as soon as he's saying that, the 49ers signed veteran Matt Pryor, who I think was with the Colts last year. So if Colton McKivitz wins that job, how comfortable are you with the former Mountaineer protecting whoever is the quarterback on this team?
I'm gonna be optimistic about it. I'll be open-minded about it just because, I think when Jake Brendel, when he was in the position to compete for the center position last offseason, I'm not sure I thought he would play as good as he did, right? Just based on not knowing who he is or not having seen enough of him play so far. So, I think a lot of development goes on with some of these like depth offensive lineman guys that, if the 49ers feel good enough about letting that player get more reps or compete for a starting job, it's because they earned it, right? It's because
Mhm.
they look good enough. And I know, like, I think it was Lynch who pointed out how Colton McKivitz looked when he played in place of Trent Williams, for a game. He thought he did pretty well. So, I'm going to be optimistic. I think it makes sense that he's the leader of the clubhouse because honestly, who else do they have? I think the mayor signing is depth. And that seems like a point of emphasis for, a lot of the
Mhm.
signings they've made lately, right? So, but yeah, I think it makes sense, and they'll probably bring in a draftee, right, to compete at that right tackle spot as well. So I don't think the competition ends there with just some of these depth guys. I think we'll see a rookie competing with McKivitz, but McKivitz having the experience already in this offense, the familiarity, I think he'll be the leader of the clubhouse even after training camp, unless the rookie just like blows everyone out of the water.
Yeah. Speaking of rookies, you like we talked about, interviewed some players at the combine. And one of the cool things that you did that's been getting a lot of attention is that you made a Google Doc that's keeping track of all of the players that the 49ers have talked to. Now it's
Mhm.
hard to predict, especially because they're picking in at the end of the third round. So it's hard to really make a good prediction about who they might pick. But are there any players that you have in mind that we could keep an eye on that might be around that they could target in late in the third round?
Yeah, first I want to say thanks for shouting out the draft sheet because yeah, that's been my baby this off season. It's been my big project. And really the ultimate goal to that, I want to keep doing one of those every year so that I could see some of those trends, right? Like what are they typically into? And they are pretty low key in their interest in guys, I think. So I think having all of those names together in one spot, you may be able to find some themes, or
Mhm.
I don't know, just some names to keep in mind. But yeah, some guys, I was prepared for this question, so like I noted some guys in the list that I think are notable, or that the 49ers may have extra interest in. I mean, today there are a couple of players we heard about. Tony Pauline reported that Catrell Clark out of Louisville, he's a corner. The 49ers are showing a lot of interest in him. Izzy Abeniconda, I hope I'm saying his name correctly, but he's
That's not
from
an
Pitt.
easy one.
Yeah, he's from Pitt, and he had his pro day today. The 49ers apparently met with him last night before his pro day. That was according to Ryan Fowler, and they did meet formally with him at the combine. But he had an incredible pro day, so I'm like, I don't even know if he's going to be available at their pick in the third round.
Mhm.
But there's several of the guys. I can't say for sure whether these will be third round guys. Like I have no sense of where guys are going to go. I'm just terrible at that. So these are just names that I think could
Yeah.
be on the table or could be on their board. Antonio Maffey at a UCLA offensive lineman. He has a top 30 visit scheduled with the 49ers, so that's pretty notable. Out of Penn State, Juice Scruggs, offensive lineman. He met with them at the combine, and he also said at his pro day that he has spent time with them. Like he mentioned them as one of the teams that he spent time with. So that seems pretty notable. Obviously, like I said, they're looking at offensive linemen, right?
Yeah.
And it seems like they're looking at some wide receivers as well. Makes sense. Juwan Jennings is on the last year of his contract, so I think they want to bring in a slot guy, Casimir Allen out of UCLA, who plays wide receiver. He's also played some running back as well. So he met with the 49ers at the Shrine Bowl, and he actually had a private workout with them in March.
Hmm.
So yeah, that I thought that was interesting.
Yeah.
Um, there's a lot of names out there, offensive linemen. Like I said, Tyler Steen out of Alabama, Blake Freeland out of BYU, Wanya Morris, Oklahoma, Joey Fisher, a Shepherd who had his pro day yesterday. They had Dominic that I don't know how to say his last name. The Show, or it's a very Italian name. Um, but he's the one of their national scouts, and he was, I think, watching Joey Fisher. He was also at Blake Freeland BYU's pro day. So I think he's keeping an eye on those offensive linemen who could be in that range. Maybe you trade up for someone like Freeland, not sure. And they're also clearly in the tight end market as well. And almost all of the tight ends that we spoke with or asked at the combine had met with the 49ers in some capacity. So they're
And this is a
definitely.
good draft for tight ends,
Oh yeah,
right?
it's amazing. I wouldn't even be surprised if they grab two. Like
Hmm.
just because it's that deep of a class. Like maybe they draft one and then they bring in a UDFA, because the draft class for tight ends is so deep that I think there's going to be great value throughout. So if they want to bring two in, I think that's an option, but yeah, don't quote me.
Well, that's great info, and you've done a great job with that draft tracker that you have, and people can go to your Twitter page, right?
Yeah,
And see that.
it's pinned on my Twitter account, which my Twitter is Steph49K. So it'll be the first tweet that pops up, and I got the link to the Google Doc right there.
Awesome. Steph, thanks so much. I like your background. I see the
Oh,
Bosa
thank you.
jersey. I love the "Who's Got It Better Than Us" towel
Yeah.
back there. That is
Had
super
to oh,
cool.
had to represent. Yeah, for
Yeah,
sure.
I love that one. But hey, thanks so much for joining us. And look, if you're watching on YouTube or listening on Apple or wherever you're listening, please rate, review, subscribe, and do the same thing for Steph at 49 Carats Podcast and also the Gold Standard Network. She and Jason Aponte do the Bully Ball, and it's a great podcast. So, Steph, thanks so much for joining me. Hope that you have a great rest of your week.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. I'm honored that I was one of your like early guests, and I've
Yeah.
seen you've had some great guests on, so I'm honored to be part of the list. And thanks for having me on. It was fun.
Yeah, my pleasure. You're doing great work.